Members of the group were worried that I would go on at too great length, but I was confident I can keep an audience, and it's a serious audience, I can keep it, and you are serious, and you stayed. And now my obligation is to reciprocate your kindness and your generosity, and I mean that, and your respect. Everybody listened with real, genuine respect, and I'm sure there were many things I said which a lot of people didn't like to hear. And still, you showed me, you accorded me the respect which I'm grateful for. And now it's my turn to have an open ear to you. And so I want to first, if I can ask it, I want to first take questions from dissenters. Maybe the first, we'll call it the first 5 questions will come from dissenters. And I'm not going to limit your time. I want you to use your judgment. If you start getting carried away, an audience knows how to express its discomfort if you get carried away. But I prefer not to be the one to intercede in any way to censor you. So let's take the questions first from dissenters. Let's call it the first 5, if there are 5 dissenters who want to ask questions, and let's start with them. So if you'd like to raise your hand, thank you. Yeah.
In 2006, after Israel completely left Gaza, there wasn't one Israeli soldier in Gaza. It was taken over by a brutal regime called Hamas, which in its charter refuses to recognize Israel's very right to exist, and has since sent thousands of rockets, unguided rockets, fired into the Israeli population with the intention of killing civilians. If Mexico refused to acknowledge the United States' right to exist and sent thousands of unguided rockets in order to kill American civilians, what do you think an appropriate response of the United States would be?
Okay. First of all, I want to try to stick very closely, before I speculate on the last aspect of your question, I'd like to stick very closely to the factual record. So first of all, what happened in Gaza in 2005? Is it true that Israel withdrew from Gaza? There have been numerous human rights organizations who have rendered opinions on that question. As a matter of fact, I don't know if anybody here is from Israel or is familiar with the Israeli legal system. Anybody here from Israel? Okay. So Israel's most distinguished professor of international law, by everyone's reckoning, is Yoram Dinstein, the former president of the Tel Aviv University and the editor of the Israeli Yearbook on Human Rights. And Professor Dinstein just came out with a new book from Cambridge University Press entitled The International Law of Belligerent Occupation. And Professor Dinstein says what everybody else says. And you can check for yourself. You should check for yourself. My memory is trying to remember the page number, and my memory is telling me page 188, but I can't. You can email me, and I'll give you the exact reference. Professor Dinstein says, as did the Goldstone Commission, as did Human Rights Watch, as did Amnesty International, Israel remained the occupying power in Gaza after it redeployed its forces in September 2005. It remained the occupying power because 1, it controlled the airspace, 2, it controlled the territorial waters, 3, it controlled everything that went into Gaza, 4, it controlled everything that went out of Gaza, 5, it controlled the population registry, so it decided who can be and who can't be allowed into Gaza. So under the 4th Geneva Conventions, the definition of an occupation, Israel remained the occupying power in Gaza. What Israel in effect did in 2005, what Israel in effect did was it threw the keys of the jails to those who were being jailed, and then it encircled the prison called Gaza and slammed shut the prison gates. But it didn't cease to be the occupying power in Gaza. So your description that Israel did not leave one soldier inside Gaza is accurate. You could have added accurately that Israel did not leave one settler inside Gaza, but it's not accurate that it in any way changed the nature of the Israeli occupation or fundamentally changed it. Israel remained the occupying power in Gaza. after its redeployment of troops. Number two, the question of the Hamas charter. It is true the charter is an awful read, but I'm not gonna dispute the obvious or the indisputable. But it's also true, as Hamas has repeatedly said over the last several years, we're willing to accept a settlement on the June 1967 border. Khalid Michel, the leader of Hamas in Syria, the Ismail Haniyeh in Gaza, they've said it over and over again. Now I notice that you're shaking your head. Okay, it's reasonable. Maybe you're skeptical. Maybe you doubt the sincerity. But then, as the Financial Times of London said, there's a very easy way to test whether they're being sincere. The Financial Times said, call their bluff. Say, okay, you say accept the state in the 267 border. Let's go to the negotiating table and let's see if you're being honest or not. If Israel were really interested in the resolution of the conflict in the June 67 border, it would say, fine, let's negotiate. That's exactly what Israel is not doing. Now you raise the hypothetical question, the speculative question, what would Mexico do? Or I should say, what would the United States do? So let's look at exactly the terms of the analogy, because I think you left something critical out of the analogy. Let's say that Mexico had imposed a blockade on the United States. Let's say that there was a humanitarian crisis in the United States. Let's say that children were dying because of this humanitarian crisis in the United States. Let's say that everybody agreed that what Mexico was doing was illegal, its blockade and collective punishment of Americans. Now, there's not a cross-section of Americans here, but there's certainly a representation of Americans. How many people think the United States would do nothing? It would just sit there and accept an illegal blockade which was creating a humanitarian crisis over a 3-year period. How many people think the United States would passively accept that? How many people think the United States would just do nothing? So why do you expect that Palestinians should or would conduct themselves differently than any other rational, reasonable person in the world? Of course they resisted, as they should, in my opinion.